Hi everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about congruent triangles. So your goal after watching this video will be able to identify some properties of congruent triangles and to see where we have some matches. So first, what are congruent triangles? Well, they are triangles that have the same shape and the same size. Each triangle has 3 angles and 3 sides. If all measures of the corresponding parts of 2 triangles are congruent, then we can also say that these triangles are congruent. So what are corresponding parts? Well, when the triangles are arranged to exactly match each other, that's what we're going to call corresponding. So everything matching side to matching side is what works here. So first off, it does matter the way that we write these congruent triangles. So A to B to C, you're going to notice how I trace this out. We start off with A to B. We next go from B to C, and then finally we go from C to A. So A to B to C, in that order, that matters. So when we're writing this out for saying these triangles are congruent to each other, we have to make sure that that pattern matches. So we have to make sure we start off with E to F, and then we also go from, sorry, we're getting kicked out there. So E to F, and then we also go from F to G. Let's make sure we're matching here. So F to G in that order. So triangle EFG. Okay, so again, just making sure that we are tracing these in exactly the same way. That way we know what is corresponding. Well, if we're looking at corresponding, let's actually jump to sides. We actually already see these outlined for us. So we know that corresponding sides here we have AC is congruent to EG. And again, intentionally wrote that in green here because we can see that highlighted in green. Next, let's do it in blue. So our BC side is congruent to our FG side. And then finally, we can do it in purple. Our AB side is also congruent to our EF side. In a very similar way, let's mark our angles now. So we'll call our inside angle here between our purple and our green. That'll be our brown one. Between our purple and our blue, we'll call that our yellow one. And then finally, our red one is between blue and green. So again, color matching here, we can see in brown that angle A is congruent to angle E. We can see in yellow that angle B is congruent to angle F. And then finally, we can see in red that angle C is congruent to angle G. So again, look at these colors. Hopefully that helps you a little bit, but we're matching our corresponding parts. So our angles that match each other when we line these things up the same way. Next, a little bit of a weird geometry thing, but when we have congruent triangles, we call it Cpctc. Their corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So it's basically saying all of the pieces of congruent triangles are also congruent. So 2 triangles are congruent if and only if their corresponding parts are also congruent. So we need this to be true in order to say that triangles are congruent. If any of those pieces aren't congruent, that means they're not the same, then the triangles also are not the same. All right, so some properties of congruence. Just like we learned in our last chapter, the same thing applies to triangles that would apply to anything else. So reflexive just means that something equals itself. So KLJ is congruent to triangle KLJ. Now notice, just like angles, it does matter the order we write this in. So we have to go from K to L to J. Okay, so be careful on future ones to make sure you're doing the same thing. Symmetry means that we are allowed to flip. So if we say that KLJ is congruent to QRP, and again, notice, we go from K to L, L to J, have to do the same thing here, Q to R, R to P. We could also say the symmetric property of this tells us we can say QRP is congruent to KLJ. Transitive, you can probably guess where this one is going. Our first triangle, if KLJ is congruent to QRP and QRP is congruent to YZX, then this is our transitive piece. We can link, so if basically triangle 1 is equal to triangle 2 and triangle 2 is equal to triangle 3, we can now link 3 back to 1. So we can say that KLJ is congruent to YZX. And again, nothing about the transitive property has changed. The only difference now is we're just applying it to a triangle. So your goal here for our second example problem is to draw out two triangles, probably just like the ones that are above, I would say. Make sure that the corresponding sides are matching just like so. So like WXZ and then STJ. And now it's your turn to list out the corresponding sides and the corresponding angles. So take a little practice, very similar to what we did on that first page here before we went to page number 2. All right, our last piece here is to do a little bit of practice. We want to name corresponding sides and corresponding angles. So QR equals 12, RS equals 23, and QS equals 24. We also are given that RT equals 12, TV equals 24, and RV equals 23. So before we do anything, we probably want to potentially rewrite these triangles so that they match each other. So if we keep, gosh, I'm sorry that I got kicked out there again. So if we keep our first one the same, if we keep it just like this, we would want to rewrite our second one so that it matches. And we can do that like 24 matches 24, 23 matches 23, and 12 matches 12, except we need to do it with this triangle here. So our 23 side goes from R to V, and our 24 side goes from V to T. So when we're rewriting this now, it'll be a little bit easier to match up sides that basically match with each other. So the corresponding sides are the ones that equal the same thing. So both of them that equal 24, we have QS equals TV. And again, we can notice those are both on that left side. Okay, so that's a start. So do the same thing for the other sides. We should have a few more congruent statements, and then do the same thing for the other angles. We should have 1, 2, 3 congruent angles. And then finally, just like we were talking about on the other page here, we have to name these triangles the same way. So from Q to R and R to S, so that is triangle QRS is congruent to, and then do the same thing here, T to R, R to V. So TRV, like that. Okay? So finish up a little bit of practice here. The two examples today should hopefully help get a little bit of practice. And again, if you have any questions on these, having a little bit of trouble, do the best that you can for the video. Always submit something and bring those questions.